Andrew Hart and Lord Botetourt High School played host to the inaugural Bob Johnson Classic, where teams from throughout the state of Virginia, with Emory and Henry college ties, most of which being head coaches who played for Coach Johnson, now head coaching in high school basketball, participated in the event. One guy who is not a coach but a former Bob Johnson player and an Alta Vista standout, Jay Rosser, talked about his initial meeting with Coach Jay.
But in those first meetings, it wasn't necessarily about basketball. I mean, what I remember more so in our initial conversations are the bigger picture questions. You know, where did I envision myself from a career standpoint? You know, what was I there to study? And that was unique. You know, that was certainly unique in the discussions and in the recruiting process. But I thought it was, you know, certainly it provoked deeper thought for me and where I was going and really giving of my time and energy and commitment for the next 4 years.
Former Emory and Henry and Liberty High School standout Will Sloan talks about how he found his way to Southwest Virginia to play for Coach Bob Johnson.
Well, I like to think my experience with Coach Johnson is pretty unique. It actually started early in high school. I was fortunate enough to play for two head coaches, Mark Hanks and Derek Elmore, who were both Emory and Henry graduates and played for Coach Johnson. So we would go to Emory for team camps throughout my high school career. So I got to see up close the program that he built, you know, the people that he surrounded himself with, the players that he recruited. So by the time my senior year, getting looks at a couple colleges, and fortunate enough to Coach Jay asked me to be on this team, and for me it was a no-brainer.
We talked about all the head coaches who had played for Coach Johnson or worked with Coach Johnson. One coach who played for Coach Johnson is Perry McClure's Mike Cartolaro. He talked about the impact that Bob Johnson had on helping him.
He turned me loose in practice one day with guys that I had played with, and I had no idea it was coming. He said, "Hey, I'm going to recruit. You got practice today." You can imagine my jaw dropped because I'm thinking, hey, I played with these guys. But he was trying to begin the process of me coaching, and he put me in a very difficult situation. As a matter of fact, I made them run because they thought I was, it was going to be easy-teasy that day because Coach was gone, and I wasn't going to allow that to happen. So they were mad at me for a little bit back at the dorm, but, it was all good, and that was one of the first steps that he started with me as a coach.
Liberty Christian Academy coach and Emory and Henry standout Paul Redgate also said Coach Jay had a big influence on his coaching career.
I mean, his legacy is one of a kind. He was demanding, but he was caring, and that's kind of the style that I've tried to have, is trying to be, hey, you got to be demanding, but you got to be caring as well.
As always with coaches, no matter what the classification is, there are always similarities and differences. Will Sloan talked about the differences in Coach Bob Johnson and Bob Johnson the man.
A lot of differences, but a lot of similarities, and you're going to probably hear this from other guys that played for him, was the lessons that you learn off the court. It was definitely the most challenging times of my life as an 18-year-old coming in there and playing for a coach like him, but also the most rewarding. Like I said, not just basketball, but the things that you learn off the court and the relationships that you build with the guys that you play with.
Jay Rosser talked about the initial meetings earlier with Bob Johnson. Well, now he talked more about Bob Johnson's impact.
My freshman year, I had Coach as a professor in our Western Traditions class. So I got to see that firsthand. First semester, freshman year, I had Coach as obviously my basketball coach that I'm seeing multiple hours a day, along with my 3-hour credit class of Western Traditions. And that's what probably astounded me the most, of how well read he was and how engaged he was in the classroom, but more so how he challenged us in the classroom and the questions, the very thought-provoking questions that he would have for us, but not shaming or not speaking down. It's really engaging in the discussion, which I hadn't really experienced in high school, or really any class for that matter. It really spoke to how well-rounded he was. Looking back, pretty interesting to connect the dots, so to speak, on how really impactful he was, not just on the court.
Head coach of the Fighting Blues, Mike Cartolaro, won his first state title with Alta Vista when they knocked off Riverheads in the early 2000s. Mike Cartolaro talks about getting the phone call from Bob Johnson, not so much congratulatory, but hey, what are you going to do next?
He wasn't going to celebrate too much, and he wasn't going to get too high up, and he wasn't going to get too low. And that's what he taught me, really. You need to be able to maintain. So, no, just, hey, great job, the usual stuff. And then immediately starts challenging me, like, okay, now who you have back, who you losing, what do you think, what are you going to do to motivate them? I mean, that was Coach Johnson.
A memory that Andrew Hart, Lord Bottott's head coach, said that stood out to him was Coach Jay coming to his last game when he was a member of the Pulaski County Cougars.
I remember him coming to my last high school game, and that kind of always stuck with me, that he came to that regional game and left a message for me afterwards and called me to follow up after that. So it was just pretty evident that the culture and the family environment was something that I wanted to be a part of.
Great role models in our lives can not only be cheerleaders, but they can give us a good old-fashioned talking to. Mike Cartolaro talks about being on the other side of that talking to.
We were selling concessions at the football games for the basketball program, and a couple of my fraternity brothers actually let a couple of drinks and a candy bar or two slip to a couple of pretty co-eds. And I don't know how it got back to Coach, and he was coaching football, but I got called into his office after the game. He was coaching, and he'd showered, and I go in, and Coach was talking to me, but he didn't have any clothes on. But I was scared to death. I stood there at full attention. I got chewed pretty good. So needless to say, and I didn't do it, but I had to take one for the team.
The Emory and Henry fraternity is really deep and really rich. It's like a brotherhood. Jay Rosser talks about that Emory and Henry DNA, obviously modeled and laid by Coach Bob Johnson.
Emory DNA can mean a lot of different things. I think the true tone is simply that the grit and that day-to-day grind mentality. And I think it can be summed up in just an explanation of just doing what you say you're going to do. It's being present, being involved and playing your role on that day-to-day basis. Coach Jay spoke a lot about Mango Day Warrior, which goes into a level of detail. I won't bore you with that, but I think it speaks to really to that DNA, or really to the quality of the person, both in between the lines and outside the lines, whether that's in the community, whether that's in the classroom, and being that leader, even when the light's not on you.
Casey Johnson, head coach and son of Bob Johnson, talked about what he learned from his dad, how he could apply it in the coaching ranks as well.
How to hold everybody to the same standard. He treated the 12th guy like he treated the first guy. There was no favoritism. Basketball-wise specifically, he changed his styles. He went from a hard-nosed man-to-man team, up-tempo, to running a lot of sets, to, he was started out motion and full court man-to-man. And then he kind of morphed into running sets. He invented a triangle offense, which is not like the Bulls. It's a 2-out, 3-in motion that he was able to find. I think he had 4 2,000-point scorers that all benefited from that. And that's an offense that he and Mike Young, Virginia Tech's head coach, came up with together. Then he kind of started doing a swing offense like Bo Ryan did at Wisconsin. He did Tony Bennett's block remover stuff, which he got from Tony Bennett's dad, Dick. And then he went into the run and gun. He was always an up-tempo, in-your-face, physical. He just was great at coaching effort. Guys would run through a wall. His motivational speeches were unbelievable.
We know that Coach Jay was great at motivating his players from what we've been told through stories. Coach Andrew Hart shares a story of Bob Johnson as a self-motivator.
I was told that at some point, probably mid-'90s, late 90s, he had a knee replacement, and somebody came in the weight room at 5 a.m. in the morning to do their own workout. As college players, we're coming in early to practice or do your own workouts. And beating them to the gym almost every day was Coach Johnson doing his workout for his rehab for his knee. And then, one person with a different choice of words said that he was self-motivating himself in a way that, he had never necessarily heard. And that just, to me, that always kind of stuck with me, because to me that was like, here's a 50-some-year-old working as hard as he can to get his body back, and probably working harder than the players that he's trying to get to do that himself.
Most of the time you think of airports employing the best luggage deliverers. Paul Redgate shares a story when Bob Johnson stepped into the realm of luggage delivery.
Let's just say I remember we were coming home from a loss, and I believe it might have been from Virginia Wesleyan, which was about a 7-hour drive, and so it was a long drive. And so after the loss, the first couple of hours we're all upset. None of us are talking. When that long drive, eventually we're going to start talking and hanging out and joking. I remember that bus ride, we got to the point where maybe we were a little too loud and rambunctious. And I just remember getting off that bus. Coach Johnson, I'll put it mildly, Coach Johnson delivering us our luggage by maybe tossing it a few feet here and there. It was pretty funny though. But there's so many good memories. But he was one of a kind.
Jay Rosser shares a story about Bob Johnson that will strike a chord with a lot of Emory and Henry alums.
A lot of people around the Emory community know how fond Coach Jay was of his dog Pete. And Pete was allowed anywhere and everywhere, never on a leash. And Pete was in our practices, just roaming around, just like he owned the place. And we're running drills, and we're probably halfway through practice, and we're into it. Coach Jay's getting on us for whatever reason, and then we're running a drill, and Pete walks out, and one of the guys on the squad, trips over Pete, and ultimately we're like, oh my God, like everybody just freezes, right? We all freeze. We're like, what's Coach A going to do? Looks at the guy, he's like, seems like Pete's a lot tougher than you are right now, and so lighten the mood a little bit, and we relaxed and, continued on with practice. But it was, he was never afraid of a one-liner, and was pretty quick on his feet.
Who best to give some stories about the man, Bob Johnson, than his son, Casey Johnson?
We were scrimmaging Maryville, and this referee called a technical on one of his, and the ironic thing is, the player was Justin Porterfield, who's now a Division I referee himself. Anyways, guy called a tech in the scrimmage, and you don't do that much in scrimmages. You talk to the coach, and the guy wanted to shoot the free throws, which made no sense, so he comes down, they're shooting the free throws. My dad's like, whatever, shoot them, I don't care. And the referee comes down to our bench, and my dad's like, what are you doing? The guy goes, I'm an SEC, Southeastern Conference. I'm an SEC official, and I'm here on a Sunday out of the goodness of my heart. And then he goes, and if you don't watch out, I'm about to get mad. And my dad did this thing where when he got excited and he used to stutter when he spoke, he started laughing and stuttering at the same time. And he goes, and he goes, the guy goes, I'm going to get mad. And my dad goes, oh, really? And they're about 2 steps apart. And my dad goes, and then what? And then he takes another step to him, so they're toe-to-toe, and my dad goes, and then what happens when I get mad? And his chest comes up and his teeth come out, and he starts gritting his teeth, and everyone knows what that means. And that look means, I wish I were somewhere else right now, because it's not a good feeling for a guy that, there was a rumor that he could kill a man 16 different ways with a spoon. And then I asked him, I said, Dad, is that true? He goes, yeah, but it was a dull spoon. And then the best story probably that kind of encompasses everything that he was I was in a IHOP with him and Jamie and Christian, who's now the head coach at George Washington University. And we were at a clinic, a run and gun clinic in Kansas City. And he asked us, do you think leadership is born? Are you born with it, or can it be developed? And we were like, oh, Jamie and I said, you're born with it. You either got it or you don't. And my dad goes, I disagree. He goes, I decided long ago I was going to be a bad man. And I said, Dad, when did you decide that? He goes, in the 2nd grade. And he was as bad a dude as you ever wanted to come in contact with.
Will Sloan, in summary, sums up what most people would say about Coach J.
Tough coach to play for, but there's no one else I would rather play for sure.
The final words on Coach Bob Johnson goes to his son and Alta Vista head coach Casey Johnson.
He was a tremendous coach, and he was a better person. He really taught all of his athletes, students as well, but everybody that played for him in his 27 years, 30 years overall coaching, 35, I guess, really taught everybody how to live their life the right way, how to be a contributing member of society, how to go about their daily lives. And he taught guys how to be a good basketball player, but then he also taught them how to be a good man. He won a lot of games, and, the Coach of the Year is named after him and everything, and the court at Emory's named after him, so he was a great coach. But the reason that so many people have such a great respect for him throughout the state and the country as well is he was just a great guy. His character, his integrity, he was a great man. He fought for this country. He's a veteran. I think he did things the right way. So many people owe him quite a bit in their lives. That's what I hope people would know about it.
Big props, like we mentioned, to Lord Botetourt High School. Andrew Hart, Chuck Pound, the athletic director, did an outstanding job staging the first event of what we hope will be many Bob Johnson Classics in the future. And props to all the Emory and Henry alumni who came out to support the man, no myth, but he is a legend, Coach Bob Johnson. For the Sports Buffet podcast, this is Bob Alvis.